Many of you have contacted me to ask me on my views on how you can protect yourself as a learner in clinical practice and not get wrapped up in feeling as though you are an extra pair of hands in a clinical placement. Now, all of what I'm about to say can be related to any field of nursing, any professional group really, any role really, because teams work everywhere. And the reason I've started with this is because in order to establish yourself in a learner role, you have to look at who else you are with. You are working within a team, and it is much more about that teamwork element than potentially you realise. It's really tough. You are entering into a very tight-knit community. You are entering into a team that potentially have worked together for many years, and we know that teams in healthcare really have to make sure that they are working robustly together. A lot of the comments that I get around this topic is more based on individuals feeling as though they are being used as a pair of hands, or they are added into clinical teams and you're there to help as opposed to there to learn. I'm not going to get into the depths of that conversation, but there is a question that I would like you to ask yourself in order to help you with the question that you've come to me with. What does learning look like, and what does it feel like for you? Now, I ask that question because often the students that I've worked with in clinical practice that have really struggled with this point, they are often coming from the angle of, I wish I could spend some time with my mentor, assessor, supervisor, preceptor, one-on-one in a quiet room somewhere, going through all the topics that we wanted to discuss to really get to the nitty-gritty of the theory behind the clinical practice that you're trying to deploy. That is where your theory-based learning comes into play, i.e. your university blocks. So I really urge you to ask yourself the question of, what does learning feel like and look like to you? Because if you can understand that point and you're veering down that route of wishing to spend one-on-one time with the clinicians in the area to learn about the theory behind the care that you're delivering, absolutely, yes, that is definitely part of your practice placement, but it shouldn't be the whole, because you're there with real life patients, real life nurses, doctors, allied health professionals to help you develop in that clinical role. Now, when we talk about you entering into a new clinical unit to start a learning placement, please know one really important thing. There is more at play on that ward or that clinical unit than you just starting out as the new kid. When groups of people come together, they form a team. They will go through, in a variety of different orders, the process of forming, storming, norming and performing. Each one of these stages can be very highly intricate on its own, let alone in the whole. But I tell you this so you don't necessarily feel as though if you're getting the vibe that you're not wanted, people don't like you, there is much more at play than just you in this position. Now, that is not me saying there is more to the world than just yourself. What I'm saying is, by you entering into an environment in which you want to learn, you're therefore going to try and join into that team. But what will be happening is completely out of your control. You begin by forming relationships on that ward. That then could lead into storming, where those relationships are trying to work themselves out. You then hopefully get to the stage of norming, where things start to level out a little bit, and then you are a performing team. This can be done in a matter of moments, days. It can take years sometimes for teams to come together and work to a high performance level. While you may be greeted by the ward manager and your assessor with open arms, the implicit stuff, the stuff that you can't see, that forming, storming, norming, performing, will be going on in the background without you even being aware. If you're interested in this stuff, you can simply look up Tuckman's Stages of Group Development. Now, no matter what team you are in or you're going into, I'm pretty certain that you agree that communication is key. All team members, yourself included, should be encouraged to speak up, to ask questions, to celebrate when things go well, to come together for debrief when things potentially have been a little bit more difficult. And hey, that's exactly why you are going into clinical placement, to develop your professional skills and teamwork. I've combined a previous model that I've talked about, and if you've watched some of my other videos you may recognise it, but I've combined it with somebody else's work, two ladies called Sarah and Helen from Squiggly Careers. My own model is based on the recognise, respond and manage, and Sarah and Helen's work is based on discover, define and deliver. So the work done by Sarah and Helen, look at that first stage of establishing yourself within a team for the first time as discover. They talk about it as a discovery week or a discovery month. Now, considering some of your placements may only be 4 weeks long, I thought perhaps a month maybe a little bit of a waste of time. So this is where my model kind of joins it a little bit nicely. So still placing an importance on having a discovery phase within that first time that you join a team, but looking at it in terms of how you're going to develop the skills in order to recognize when your patients may be deteriorating, when they may be getting better, when the treatments may be working and when they may not be working, and recognizing the clinical state of the patient in front of you. You're going to need to discover the ward for what it can offer. I've talked previously in other videos as well around spending proper time ensuring that you are in tuned to the learning environment that you're working in. And by that, I mean what is available to you for your learning. What types of clinical interventions happen that you've never experienced before, or potentially you have experienced and you'd like to now start taking some of that clinical role on. When it actually comes to the placement itself, show up and be ready. If you turn up to that area being prepared to take notes on the first day, showing that you're engaged, that you are listening, potentially asking some questions, you are able to therefore demonstrate your role as a learner from day one. I know it is very tempting, we've all been there, where you turn up to placement and you're shy, you're nervous, you don't want to say anything to upset anybody, you don't want to answer the phone, but actually what this does, it may demonstrate that you are not engaged and that you don't want to be there. So find just little things that you can do in order to really stamp your role as a learner, whether that is taking notes when somebody's talking to you, looking through the folders that may be at the nurse's station, or researching some of the treatments and conditions that you're coming into contact with. It's key that you show that you are engaged. A simple thank you will show that you've listened, you've heard, and that you appreciate the time that that person has taken. They are much more likely to want to do that again in the future. Not gushy stuff, just a simple, heartfelt thank you. So when you feel as though you've had enough time to spend in that discovery phase, it's time to move on to your definition day, your defining stage. So you've been able to spend some time recognizing the environment you're in, the patients that you're working with. Now, in order to define what you have learned, you're actually learning how to develop some of the skills in which you are going to need to deploy to care for the patients at the next stage. And this stage is very simple. This stage is just all about asking those questions. Can I just check that I've learned this correctly? Can I just check that I have this right? And while it might actually be quite a simple stage, it's pivotal in order for you to make sure that you are developing and delivering correct techniques, which is why questioning is so important in healthcare. Listen and be attentive. It's very easy for us, if we think we know what we're doing from previous experience, to switch off at a stage where we feel as though we've got the right level of experience and knowledge to be able to deliver something. The team that you're working with may do things slightly different, and actually it's guaranteed that every ward area, every clinical unit will have to, because of the patients they look after and the teams they work in, do things slightly different. It is exhausting to be listening actively, constantly, and to be taking in everything around you. So make sure that you are taking care of yourself by taking regular breaks, but also spending time alone, somewhere quiet, or with a peer group to reflect on what it is that you're coming up against. Remember that this stage is all about looking at the stuff that you've been discovering and starting to unpick it so you can begin learning exactly what it is that's needed for you to respond to that patient in front of you in the future. Which brings us to D-Day, delivery day. And this is where you start to deploy some of that learning in order to manage the patients that you're looking after. Now, do remember, check out the video in the description where I talk about the model of recognize, respond, and manage, because you're not always expected to manage the patient population, but there are certainly elements of care that you can manage as a student nurse, as a learner in practice. So it is worth thinking about which elements of care you are able to provide effectively. When it comes to you delivering everything that you have learned through the first couple of days or weeks of placement, however tempting again that it is to just go off and do this stuff, remember that supervision within healthcare is pivotal to the safety of patients. The first time you do anything in clinical practice that you've not done yet before, you may have seen 100 times over, but not yourself delivered something, then you need direct supervision. It could be indirect supervision depending on what it is that you're about to do, but ultimately making sure that you are safe is huge at this stage of the game. Delivering daring to put into practice what you've learned is the stage at which you can literally feel your confidence grow. Whether that is because you do something potentially erroneously, you do it wrong, you may feel as though your confidence is knocked, but from that knock, you will develop. So supervision is key, not only for the patient's safety and your own, but also in terms of your development, because you'll then have somebody to really go through it with in fine detail to unpick and learn better for next time. Now, I appreciate that I haven't said anything that is potentially groundbreaking in this video, but if you are thinking that, please take that as a confidence boost for yourself. Everything that I've said potentially is revision for yourself, but surely that should go some way to show you just how simple these things are. But when it comes to actually putting some of this stuff into practice, remembering that forming, storming, norming, performing, it's real. It's going on, whether you are aware of it or whether you're not. So if you're feeling those days where something just isn't clicking, yes, it could absolutely be that you're having an off day, and absolutely fine. Or it could be that the people that you're working with could be going through something of their own. It's very easy for us to blame ourselves, but by deploying some of the tactics that I've discussed here, you will be able to demonstrate your role as a learner in clinical practice and start to encourage others to invest that time within you, and that is a very positive cycle to be in. I will say though, if you are feeling as though you are not having the right level of supervision or support, you have to speak up. Speak up to somebody within the clinical area, whether that's somebody directly in the unit that you're in or the hospital that might be there to support students in practice, as well as speaking up to your university or your college that you are with. If you really are feeling as though you are not getting any learning and you've tried to deploy as much as everything that we've discussed today, then you have to speak up, because you're there to learn, and if you're not learning, you're not developing. You are going to be even harder to yourself than you are needed to be. I really do hope this video has been helpful. If you do have any tactics that you deploy in clinical practice to establish yourself in those learning positions in clinical teams, pop a comment down below, and I'm sure we would all love to learn from your experiences. Until next time, which hopefully won't be so long, take care and be safe.